Picture this, it's 3:17 a.m. The world holds its breath in that profound silence that exists nowhere else in the 24-hour cycle. Your eyes open without alarm, without reason you can name. Yet here you are, fully awake in what ancient traditions called the hour when heaven touches earth. You're not alone in this experience. Millions report this same phenomenon waking naturally between 3 and 4 a.m. Minds crystal clear, thoughts flowing with unusual clarity. Islamic tradition honors this as the hour of divine mercy. European folklore recognized it as when the veil grows thin. But perhaps no one understood this cosmic timing better than Thoth, the Egyptian keeper of hidden wisdom. As the god who recorded the weight of souls and mapped the mysteries of consciousness, Thoth knew something profound about these pre-dawn hours. He understood why creativity surges at 3 a.m., why spiritual experiences peak, why your mind operates differently when the rest of humanity sleeps. The ancient wisdom holders weren't superstitious. They were observing something real, something measurable, something that modern science is finally beginning to decode. In the shadow-drenched temples of ancient Egypt, while most of the world slept, initiates would rise in the pre-dawn darkness to commune with Thoth, the ibis-headed god who held dominion over time itself. These weren't random midnight wanderings of restless minds. These were calculated, purposeful awakenings guided by a cosmic understanding that we've almost entirely forgotten. Thoth wasn't just another deity in the Egyptian pantheon. He was the divine architect of knowledge, the celestial scribe who recorded every deed of the living and the dead. When you see those ancient hieroglyphs depicting him with his curved beak and penetrating eyes, you're looking at the god who literally invented writing, mathematics, and the measurement of time. But here's what makes Thoth extraordinary. He existed in the spaces between opposites, light and darkness, order and chaos, the conscious mind and the mysterious realm of dreams. The Egyptians understood something profound about Thoth's nature. He wasn't bound by linear time the way we experience it. Instead, he moved through what they called the eternal now, a cyclical understanding of time, where certain hours held concentrated power for accessing divine knowledge. This is why Egyptian priests didn't just wake up randomly in the middle of the night. They calculated specific pre-dawn hours when the veil between worlds grew thin. Think about this for a moment. While we stumble through our 3 a.m. awakenings wondering if we drank too much coffee, the ancient Egyptians would have recognized this as Thoth calling. They mapped these nocturnal hours with astronomical precision, understanding that the moon's position, Thoth's celestial domain, directly influenced human consciousness and our capacity to receive higher knowledge. The Egyptian concept of time was radically different from our modern understanding. We see time as a straight line moving from past to future. They experienced it as a spiral, with certain moments recurring in cycles, each revolution bringing deeper wisdom. The hours between 3 and 5 a.m. were considered sacred windows when Thoth's influence peaked, when the rational mind quieted enough for divine communication to flow through. This wasn't superstition. Egyptian temple records show elaborate pre-dawn rituals where initiates would gather in complete darkness, their minds prepared through specific breathing techniques and meditative practices. They understood that consciousness operates differently in these early morning hours. Modern neuroscience is only now catching up to what they knew thousands of years ago, that our brains enter unique states during these nocturnal awakenings, states particularly conducive to creative insight and spiritual revelation. The Emerald Tablet, attributed to Thoth in his later incarnation as Hermes Trismegistus, contains the famous principle, as above, so below. This isn't just mystical poetry. It's a precise description of how celestial movements create corresponding shifts in human consciousness. When you wake at 3 a.m., you're experiencing this principle in action. The cosmic rhythms above are literally awakening something below, within your own awareness. Egyptian priests spent years learning to read these cosmic signatures. They knew that the moon's gravitational pull affects not just ocean tides, but the fluid in our brains. They understood that certain planetary alignments create windows of heightened receptivity. When Thoth awakened them in the pre-dawn hours, they weren't fighting it or reaching for sleeping pills. They were honoring an appointment with divine wisdom. Consider the practical genius of this approach. Thoth governed both mystical knowledge and concrete skills, like mathematics and writing. His teachings emphasized that spiritual insight must be grounded in practical application. Those 3 a.m. awakenings weren't just about receiving visions. They were about capturing divine downloads and translating them into tangible knowledge that could benefit humanity. The Egyptian initiates developed specific protocols for these nocturnal encounters with Thoth. They would rise without artificial light, allowing their eyes to adjust naturally to the darkness. They practiced what we might now call lucid dreaming techniques, maintaining conscious awareness while accessing subconscious wisdom. They recorded their insights immediately, understanding that divine knowledge fades quickly when exposed to daylight consciousness. What's remarkable is how this ancient practice mirrors what millions of people experience today. You wake at 3 a.m. with your mind suddenly crystal clear, ideas flowing, creative solutions presenting themselves. You're not experiencing insomnia, you're experiencing the same cosmic timing that Egyptian priests recognized as optimal for receiving higher knowledge. Thoth's role as mediator between conscious and unconscious realms explains why these awakenings feel different from normal sleep disruptions. There's an alertness, a heightened awareness that doesn't match typical middle-of-the-night grogginess. Your rational mind is quiet, but your intuitive faculties are extraordinarily active. This is precisely the state Egyptian initiates cultivated for divine communication. The ancient Egyptians structured their entire spiritual calendar around these cosmic rhythms. They built temples aligned with astronomical events, timed their most important ceremonies with celestial movements, and trained their priests to recognize when Thoth was extending an invitation to deeper wisdom. They understood that fighting these natural rhythms was like swimming against a cosmic current. When you find yourself awake at 3 a.m. tonight, remember that you're participating in an ancient dialogue that connects you directly to Thoth's timeless wisdom. Instead of frustration, consider approaching these moments with the reverence of an Egyptian initiate receiving a divine appointment. The same cosmic intelligence that guided ancient seekers to profound revelations is reaching out to you across millennia, using the eternal language of perfect timing. Now that we've explored Thoth's ancient wisdom about cosmic timing, let's dive into something absolutely fascinating: the hard science behind why your brain becomes a completely different instrument at 3 a.m. Your body operates on what scientists call circadian rhythms, but these aren't just simple sleep-wake cycles like most people think. These are incredibly sophisticated biological programs that orchestrate everything from your hormone production to your brainwave patterns, your body temperature, even how your neurons fire and connect. And here's where it gets really interesting. Around 3 a.m., your body creates a neurochemical environment that simply doesn't exist at any other time of day. Think about cortisol, your primary stress hormone. During daylight hours, cortisol keeps you alert, focused, ready to handle the demands of your waking life. But at 3 a.m., cortisol levels plummet to their absolute lowest point. Simultaneously, melatonin production reaches its peak, not just making you sleepy, but fundamentally altering how your brain processes information. This creates what neuroscientists are calling a consciousness window, a state where your analytical, logical mind steps back and your intuitive, pattern-recognizing mind takes center stage. Most people between 2 and 4 a.m. are cycling through their deepest REM sleep phases. But here's what's remarkable: REM isn't just about dreaming. During REM, your unconscious mind becomes hyperactive while your conscious filters are essentially offline. The barrier between your conscious awareness and the vast storehouse of your unconscious knowledge becomes tissue-thin. When you spontaneously wake during this window, you're not fully returning to normal waking consciousness, you're accessing something in between. Scientists have a name for this transitional state: hypnagogia. It's that twilight zone between sleep and full wakefulness, and the research on hypnagogia is absolutely mind-blowing. Studies show that people in hypnagogic states demonstrate enhanced creative problem-solving abilities, increased pattern recognition, and what researchers are carefully calling non-ordinary information processing. Salvador Dali used to deliberately access hypnagogia by napping with a key in his hand. When he started to fall asleep, the key would drop and wake him, allowing him to capture the insights flowing through this unique consciousness state. But there's another layer to this that's even more intriguing. Recent neuroscience research has identified something called the default mode network, a network of brain regions that becomes highly active during rest, introspection, and what scientists call self-referential thinking. During the day, when you're focused on external tasks, this network quiets down. But during those quiet early morning hours, especially around 3 a.m., the default mode network becomes incredibly active. This is the same network associated with meditation, spiritual experiences, and breakthrough insights. Now, let's talk about something most people never consider. The electromagnetic environment around you changes dramatically at night. The Schumann resonance, which is essentially Earth's natural electromagnetic frequency, becomes much more stable during nighttime hours. Some researchers are investigating whether this stable electromagnetic environment might actually influence human brainwave patterns, creating conditions more conducive to expanded awareness states. Throughout history, many of the world's greatest innovators and mystics seem to intuitively understand this. Tesla was famous for his proxenophomastis, unconventional sleep schedule, often working through the night and accessing his most profound insights during the early morning hours. Many Buddhist and Hindu meditation traditions specifically recommend the hours between 3 and 6 a.m. for deep spiritual practice, calling it the Brahma Muhurta, or God's hour. From a medical perspective, spontaneous awakening at 3 a.m. is fascinating. After ruling out obvious causes like sleep apnea, stress, or environmental factors, some people simply seem naturally attuned to these cosmic rhythms. This connects to the growing understanding of chronotypes, your genetic predisposition to certain sleep-wake patterns. While most people are familiar with the basic morning person versus night owl categories, emerging research suggests some individuals have chronotypes that naturally align with accessing altered states of consciousness during specific hours. Here's where our modern lifestyle creates a massive problem. Light pollution and electronic devices are wreaking havoc on these ancient rhythms. The blue light from screens suppresses melatonin production, disrupting not just when you sleep, but the quality and depth of your sleep cycles. Your ancestors lived in environments where the transition from day to night was gradual and complete. Their brains had regular access to these heightened awareness states that we're now accidentally blocking. But here's what's really remarkable. When people start paying attention to these natural patterns, when they begin to respect and work with their circadian rhythms instead of fighting them, they often report accessing levels of creativity, intuition, and insight they never knew they possessed. Some describe it as remembering something they'd forgotten, like reconnecting with a deeper part of themselves that had been dormant. The science is showing us that Thoth's ancient understanding of cosmic timing wasn't mystical nonsense. It was sophisticated knowledge about how consciousness operates within natural cycles. Your 3 a.m. awakenings might not be disruptions to your sleep at all. They might be invitations to access a state of awareness that our ancestors considered sacred, and that modern neuroscience is just beginning to understand. If you've been experiencing these 3 a.m. awakenings, consider this. Instead of forcing yourself back to sleep, try sitting quietly for a few minutes. Notice what thoughts, insights, or creative ideas emerge during this unique consciousness window. The question isn't whether these phenomena are real. The science confirms they are. The question is whether you're ready to understand what your consciousness is trying to show you during these sacred hours. Picture this. You're lying in bed at 3 a.m., and something feels fundamentally different about the world around you. The air seems thicker, more charged with possibility. Sounds carry differently. Your thoughts move in patterns they don't follow during daylight hours. You're not imagining this. You've entered what consciousness researchers call a liminal space. Liminal comes from the Latin word limen, meaning threshold. These are the in-between places, the doorways between different states of being, and 3 a.m., it's perhaps the most powerful liminal time we experience in our daily cycle. Think of it as standing at the edge of two worlds, where the normal boundaries that separate your conscious mind from deeper layers of awareness become remarkably thin. Thoth understood this principle intimately. In Egyptian tradition, he served as a psychopomp, literally meaning soul guide, whose job was to navigate beings between different realms of existence. But here's what most people miss. Thoth didn't just guide souls after death. Ancient texts describe him as the master of temporal thresholds, understanding that certain moments in time create natural bridges between the conscious and unconscious, the material and spiritual, the individual mind and what Carl Jung would later call the collective unconscious. When you wake at 3 a.m., you're experiencing what Thoth mapped thousands of years ago, a predictable window when reality becomes more fluid. Cultures across the globe have recognized this phenomenon. The witching hour isn't folklore born from superstition. It's an acknowledgement that human consciousness operates by entirely different rules, when our usual sensory inputs disappear and social distractions fade to silence. Medieval monasteries scheduled their most profound prayers during these hours. Islamic tradition includes tahajjud, voluntary prayers offered in the deep night when the soul is believed to be most receptive to divine connection. Hindu scriptures describe the period between 3 and 5 a.m. as Brahma Muhurta, the hour of the Creator, when spiritual practices yield the most powerful results. These weren't random cultural accidents. They represent a shared human recognition that consciousness itself transforms during the plastifabs, these quiet hours. Modern neuroscience has begun catching up to what these ancient traditions always knew. When external stimulation drops to near zero, your brain naturally shifts into what psychologists call primary process thinking. Unlike the logical, linear, secondary process thinking that dominates your waking hours, primary process thinking is non-linear, symbolic, and deeply creative. It's the mode of consciousness that generates breakthrough insights, innovative solutions, and those sudden aha moments that seem to come from nowhere. But here's where it gets fascinating. This shift happens automatically at 3 a.m. without any special effort on your part. Dr. Arne Dietrich's research on altered states of consciousness reveals that profound spiritual experiences and creative breakthroughs share remarkably similar neurological signatures. The brain's usual filtering mechanisms, what neuroscientists call the default mode network, begin to relax their tight control over what information reaches your conscious awareness. Normally, unconscious content starts bubbling up to the surface. This explains why artists, writers, inventors, and mystics throughout history have reported their most significant revelations occurring during these pre-dawn hours. Tesla would walk the streets of New York at 3 a.m., claiming his most important inventions came to him during these nocturnal wanderings. Rumi wrote many of his most profound poems in the deep night. Even modern entrepreneurs like Jeff Bezos and Tim Cook have spoken about the clarity they find in those quiet hours before dawn. You've probably experienced this yourself without fully recognizing it. Those vivid images that flash through your mind as you're falling asleep or just waking up. Psychologists call these hypnagogic and hypnopompic hallucinations, and they represent your consciousness moving between different states of awareness. These aren't random neural firings, they're windows into normally hidden layers of your psyche. Celtic spirituality has a beautiful concept called thin places, locations where the boundary between the physical and spiritual worlds becomes gossamer, fine. Ancient stone circles, certain forests, sacred wells, places where people consistently report unusual experiences and heightened spiritual awareness. But 3 a.m. functions as a temporal thin place, a time when those same boundaries dissolve regardless of where you are physically. Research in sensory deprivation has shown that when you remove external stimulation, the brain doesn't simply shut down. Instead, it begins generating its own internal experiences, often indistinguishable from external reality. The silence and darkness of 3 a.m. create natural sensory deprivation conditions, inducing a state remarkably similar to deep meditation without requiring years of practice. This has profound evolutionary implications. Our ancestors needed heightened awareness during vulnerable nighttime hours, increased sensitivity to danger, but also increased sensitivity to subtle environmental cues that might mean the difference between survival and death. This evolutionary heritage means your nervous system is naturally primed for expanded awareness during these hours. But there's a psychological component that's equally important. During daylight hours, your ego, that part of your psyche concerned with maintaining your social identity and defending your established beliefs, operates at full strength. It filters information, dismisses ideas that don't fit your existing worldview, and maintains the psychological boundaries that help you function in society. At 3 a.m., those ego defenses naturally soften. You become more emotionally sensitive, more intuitive, more open to perceptions that your daytime mind would automatically dismiss. This isn't weakness, it's a doorway to expanded awareness. Consider how many spiritual traditions incorporate practices that mimic these natural 3 a.m. conditions. Meditation in darkness, extended periods of silence, fasting to alter consciousness, isolation from social stimulation. They're essentially trying to recreate what happens automatically when you wake in the deep night. Modern consciousness researchers like Dr. Robin Carhart Harris have discovered that profound spiritual experiences involve what they call increased neural entropy. Essentially, your brain becomes more flexible, more open to new patterns of connection. The rigid neural pathways that govern your ordinary thinking begin to soften, allowing for novel combinations of ideas and insights. This is exactly what Thoth understood about liminal time. He recognized that consciousness isn't fixed, it's fluid, changeable, and during certain windows, remarkably malleable. When you wake at 3 a.m., you're not experiencing random insomnia. You're entering a natural, altered state where the impossible becomes possible. where insights that elude your daytime mind become crystal clear. Question isn't whether these experiences are real in some objective sense. The question is, what is this expanded state of awareness trying to show you? Because when you understand that 3 a.m. represents a predictable window of heightened consciousness, those mysterious awakenings begin to look less like sleep disruption and more like scheduled appointments with a deeper version of yourself. When Thoth first revealed the mathematical principles underlying reality, he understood something that would take humanity millennia to rediscover. Numbers aren't just tools for counting. They're the fundamental language through which consciousness communicates with the cosmos. And nowhere is this more evident than in the profound significance of the number 3 and its manifestation at 3 a.m. Think about this for a moment. In every corner of human civilization, across cultures that never had contact with each other, the number 3 emerges as sacred. The Christian Trinity, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. The Hindu Trimurti, Brahma the creator, Vishnu the preserver, Shiva the destroyer. The ancient Egyptian triad of Osiris, Isis, and Horus. This isn't coincidence. It's recognition of a mathematical truth that Thoth encoded into the very structure of existence. But why 3? What makes this number so fundamentally powerful that it appears everywhere from our spiritual traditions to the quantum mechanics governing subatomic particles? The answer lies in what philosophers call the dialectical process. Thesis, antithesis, synthesis. 2 opposing forces create tension, and from that tension emerges something entirely new. Light and dark don't just oppose each other. They create the possibility of dawn and dusk. Conscious and unconscious minds don't just conflict. They generate the liminal space where creativity flourishes. Male and female principles don't just complement. They birth new life. At 3 a.m., you're experiencing this cosmic principle in real time. Day and night reach their point of maximum tension. Your conscious mind, exhausted from the day's activities, loosens its grip on linear thinking. Your unconscious mind, freed from the constant chatter of daily concerns, begins to surface with its deeper wisdom. And in that space, between that sacred third space, something extraordinary becomes possible. Thoth understood that consciousness itself operates according to these mathematical principles. When he designed the Great Pyramid, he wasn't just creating a tomb, he was building a 3-dimensional representation of how cosmic energy moves through space and time. The pyramid's 3-sided faces meeting at a single point demonstrate how multiple perspectives can converge into unified understanding. This same principle governs why your most profound insights often come in 3s. You'll notice that breakthrough moments rarely happen in isolation. They cluster. You'll have one realization, then another that builds on the first, then a third, that synthesizes both into something you never could have imagined. 3 deep breaths don't just calm you. They create a rhythm that synchronizes your nervous system with natural cycles. 3 key insights don't just inform you. They provide the triangulation needed for genuine understanding. The mathematics goes deeper. In the Fibonacci sequence, that miraculous pattern found everywhere from nautilus shells to galaxy spirals, 3 appears as the first number where the previous 2 digits actually sum to create something greater. 1 + 1 = 2, but 1 + 2 = 3, and suddenly you have growth, expansion, the mathematical foundation for the golden ratio that governs everything from the proportions of your face to the structure of DNA. Your DNA itself operates on this principle of 3. The genetic code uses triplets, combinations of 3 nucleotides, to encode the instructions for life. Not pairs, not quartets, but triplets. Thoth knew that 3 represents the minimum complexity needed for true creation, for information that can build upon itself and evolve. This is why 3 a.m. functions as what ancient traditions called a temporal portal. Time itself isn't uniform. It has texture, rhythm, points where the usual rules become more flexible. Modern physics confirms this through quantum mechanics, where observation itself changes reality, where particles can exist in multiple states simultaneously until the moment of measurement collapses them into specificity. At 3 a.m., you become that observer. The reduced sensory input, the altered brainwave states we discussed earlier, the natural dip in cortisol and spike in melatonin, all of this creates optimal conditions for what Carl Jung called synchronicity. Those meaningful coincidences that seem to defy statistical probability suddenly become commonplace during these liminal hours. People report the same phenomena over and over, waking at 3 a.m. with the solution to a problem. they'd been wrestling with for months, receiving phone calls or messages at exactly 3 a.m. from people they'd been thinking about, having dreams at this hour that later prove prophetic or provide crucial guidance. This isn't supernatural, it's mathematical. When your consciousness aligns with these natural rhythms, you tap into the same organizational principles that govern everything from weather patterns to stock market fluctuations. The ancient mystery schools understood this. They scheduled their most important rituals and initiations during the third hour after midnight, knowing that human consciousness becomes most receptive to higher-order pattern recognition during this time. They worked with sacred geometry not as abstract art, but as practical technology for consciousness expansion. You can harness this same technology. When you wake at 3 a.m., instead of fighting it or dismissing it as insomnia, recognize it as an invitation. Take 3 conscious breaths, not just any breathing, but intentional rhythm that honors the mathematical principle you're experiencing. Ask yourself 3 specific questions about whatever challenge you're facing. Look for 3 connections between seemingly unrelated aspects of your life. This isn't mystical thinking, it's applied mathematics. When you align your consciousness with these natural patterns, you're not forcing anything. You're simply removing the resistance that normally prevents you from accessing the deeper organizational intelligence that's always operating beneath the surface of everyday awareness. The power of 3 at 3 a.m. represents your opportunity to participate consciously in the same creative principles that organize galaxies, generate life, and evolve consciousness itself. Pay attention to what emerges during these sacred hours, and you'll discover that the universe has been trying to communicate with you in its own mathematical language all along. Picture this: you're lying in bed at 3 a.m. and suddenly your mind becomes crystal clear. Ideas flow like water. Solutions to problems that stumped you for weeks appear fully formed. Creative breakthroughs arrive without effort. What you're experiencing isn't random, it's exactly what Thoth understood thousands of years ago about divine communication. In ancient Egypt, Thoth wasn't just the god of wisdom. He was the divine scribe, the keeper of cosmic records, the bridge between human consciousness and divine intelligence. Egyptian texts describe him as the one who recorded the words of the gods, who translated divine will into human understanding. But here's what most people miss. Thoth didn't just receive divine messages passively. He taught specific techniques for accessing these communications, and timing was everything. Ancient Egyptian priests knew something we're only rediscovering now. The pre-dawn hours weren't just quiet, they were sacred communication windows. Temple records describe elaborate practices performed between 3 and 5 a.m., meditation sessions where priests would enter altered states, dream work that revealed prophetic visions, and automatic writing sessions where scribes would record messages that seemed to flow through them rather than from them. The Egyptians called this phenomenon receiving the voice of Thoth, moments when knowledge arrived complete, requiring no conscious effort to construct or analyze. Modern researchers have given this experience a name: the divine download. It's that sudden influx of understanding that feels like remembering something you always knew rather than learning something new. Consider Paul McCartney waking up with the entire melody for Yesterday fully formed in his mind, or August Kekule discovering the ring structure of benzene after a hypnagogic vision of a snake eating its own tail. Nikola Tesla described receiving complete blueprints for inventions during early morning states of consciousness. These weren't coincidences, they were accessing the same communication channels Thoth's followers had mapped millennia earlier. Modern neuroscience validates what ancient wisdom keepers knew intuitively. During the early morning hours, your brain naturally produces more theta and alpha waves, the same frequencies associated with deep meditation, creative insight, and what researchers call non-ordinary states of consciousness. When external stimulation is minimal and your analytical mind isn't fully engaged, you become a clearer receiver for subtle information. But accessing these states requires more than just being awake at 3 a.m. Thoth's teachings emphasized preparation and practice. Ancient initiates would create sacred space, not elaborate temples, but dedicated areas free from distraction where the mind could settle into receptivity. They understood that divine communication requires the right internal and external conditions. The practice of automatic writing, traced back to Thoth's scribal traditions, bypasses your conscious mind's editorial function. When you write continuously without stopping to think or correct, you access information streams that normal thinking can't reach. Many people discover that their most profound insights emerge not from careful analysis, but from this kind of unrestricted expression. Dream work formed another cornerstone of Thothic practice. Ancient Egyptians kept detailed dream records, understanding that the sleeping mind could access information unavailable to waking consciousness. They developed techniques for remaining aware during the transition between sleep and wakefulness, that liminal state we explored earlier, where symbolic and direct communication often occurs. Here's where discernment becomes crucial, and this is where Thoth's role as the god of truth and cosmic order becomes essential. Not every thought that arises during these expanded states carries genuine insight. Ancient practitioners developed sophisticated methods for distinguishing authentic divine communication from mental noise or wishful thinking. Genuine insights often share certain characteristics. They arrive with a sense of completeness and clarity that feels different from ordinary thinking. They frequently solve problems or answer questions you weren't consciously working on. They tend to be practical rather than grandiose, offering specific guidance rather than vague platitudes. And they often come with what mystics call the ring of truth, an internal recognition that feels like remembering rather than discovering. The key is developing what ancient traditions called divine sight, an enhanced ability to perceive patterns and connections that aren't immediately obvious. This isn't mystical fantasy. It's what happens when you learn to access information processing capabilities your brain possesses but rarely uses. Regular practice during optimal hours trains your consciousness to recognize and receive these subtler forms of communication. Establishing your own practice doesn't require waking at exactly 3 a.m. every night. The principle is finding your personal optimal window times when your mind is alert but not overstimulated, when external demands are minimal, when you can create space for receptivity. Some people discover their clearest insights arrive during late evening hours. Others find early morning most productive. The key is consistency and intentionality. Start simple. Dedicate 20 minutes during your optimal time for unrestricted writing or quiet reflection. Keep a dedicated notebook for insights that arise during these sessions. Notice patterns in the information you receive. Track which practices yield the most valuable results for your specific situation. Pay attention to the quality of insights you receive during different states of consciousness, and you'll begin to recognize the distinct feeling of information that arrives through these deeper channels. What Thoth understood, and what modern practitioners are rediscovering, is that divine communication isn't supernatural intervention, it's natural human capacity operating at its full potential. When you create the right conditions, maintain the proper receptivity, and develop discernment about what you receive, you access intelligence that transcends ordinary thinking. This is why you wake at 3 a.m. Not because something is calling to you from outside, but because something within you recognizes the optimal conditions for accessing the deeper wisdom that's always available. Thoth's ancient teachings provide the roadmap for transforming these spontaneous awakenings into deliberate practice, turning random insights into reliable access to expanded awareness. The veil between worlds grows thin during these hours, as we've explored. The sacred mathematics of 3 creates optimal conditions, as we've discovered. Now you understand how to work consciously with these natural rhythms, using time-tested practices to develop your own direct line to divine intelligence. You wake up at 3 a.m. again, and the first thought that crosses your mind isn't wonder or curiosity, it's frustration. You've been conditioned to believe something is wrong with you, that you're broken, that you need to fix this problem and get back to your normal 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep. But what if I told you that this frustration itself is the real problem? What if the very idea that you must sleep in one solid 8-hour block is nothing more than an industrial age invention that's severing your connection to the natural rhythms that governed human consciousness for millennia? Before the factory whistle replaced the rooster's crow, before electric lights turned night into artificial day, our ancestors lived by entirely different rhythms. They didn't fight their bodies, they listened to them. And what they discovered through thousands of years of natural living was something that Thoth understood intimately: human. Consciousness operates in cycles, not binary states. The ancient Egyptians recognized what they called polyphasic consciousness, the understanding that awareness ebbs and flows throughout a 24-hour period like tides responding to cosmic forces. They didn't see sleep and wakefulness as opposing states, but as different phases of consciousness, each serving specific purposes in the grand design of human development. Then came the Industrial Revolution, and everything changed. Factory owners needed workers who could operate machines for consistent, predictable hours. The natural rhythm of first sleep, quiet wakefulness, and second sleep that humans had followed for centuries suddenly became inconvenient. It didn't fit the production schedule. So they convinced us, through a combination of cultural pressure and economic necessity, that we needed to compress our entire rest period into one efficient block. Think about the language we use around sleep today. We talk about sleep, efficiency, and optimizing rest. We measure success by how quickly we fall asleep and how long we stay unconscious. We've turned one of the most sacred, mysterious aspects of human existence into a productivity metric. Historical records from before the 1800s reveal a completely different relationship with nighttime consciousness. People regularly wrote about their first sleep and second sleep, with a period of gentle wakefulness in between. This wasn't insomnia, it was called the watching or the quiet time. Medieval prayer books included specific prayers for these midnight hours. Shakespeare referenced this pattern in his plays. Charles Dickens wrote about characters naturally awakening in the middle of the night for contemplation. This magical window between sleeps, often occurring between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m., was considered the most peaceful, spiritually receptive time of the entire day. People would lie quietly, pray, meditate, have intimate conversations with their partners, or simply rest in a state of calm awareness. They understood intuitively what Thoth taught explicitly, that the pre-dawn hours offer a unique gateway between the conscious and unconscious mind. Your 3 a.m. awakening isn't a malfunction, it's your body trying to reconnect with this ancient pattern, but instead of embracing it, you've been taught to fear it. You lie there calculating how much sleep you're losing, watching the clock, feeling anxious about tomorrow's performance. This anxiety creates a cascade of stress hormones that makes returning to sleep genuinely difficult, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy that reinforces the belief that something is wrong. Modern sleep research has begun validating what our ancestors knew instinctively. Studies show that brief periods of nighttime wakefulness, when approached without anxiety, can actually improve creativity, emotional processing, and overall sleep quality. The brain uses these quiet moments to consolidate memories, process emotions, and make creative connections that simply don't happen during deep sleep or full wakefulness. But here's where it gets really interesting. Researchers have discovered that people who embrace these natural awakenings, rather than fighting them, report higher levels of life satisfaction, increased creativity, and stronger spiritual connections. They've learned to work with their consciousness rather than against it. The key lies in how you approach these moments. When you wake at 3 a.m. and immediately start battling to get back to sleep, you're creating internal warfare. Your body is offering you a gift, a quiet space for reflection, creativity, or spiritual connection, and you're treating it like an enemy invasion. Thoth's teachings suggest a radically different approach. Instead of fighting these awakenings, create a peaceful environment that honors them. Keep your bedroom slightly cool and completely dark, except for perhaps a single, dim candle. When you wake, resist the urge to check your phone or turn on bright lights. Instead, allow yourself to rest quietly, perhaps engaging in gentle meditation, gratitude practice, or simply observing your thoughts without judgment. If insights come, let them flow. Some of history's greatest innovations emerged during these quiet hours. Kekulé discovered the structure of benzene in a dreamlike state. Tesla received his most profound insights during periods of rest between sleep cycles. Even modern innovators like Jeff Bezos and Arianna Huffington have spoken about the importance of honoring natural sleep rhythms rather than forcing artificial schedules. You might worry about daytime functioning, but consider this. Many cultures that honor natural sleep patterns incorporate brief daytime rest periods. A 20-minute nap in the early afternoon can perfectly complement polyphasic sleep patterns while maintaining overall health and cognitive performance. This isn't just about sleep, it's about reclaiming your sovereignty over your own consciousness. Every time you honor your body's natural rhythms instead of forcing conformity to industrial schedules, you're choosing personal truth over societal programming. You're recognizing that your spiritual and creative development might require different rhythms than your job or your family expects. The transformation happens gradually. Start by changing your relationship with these awakenings. Instead of seeing them as interruptions, begin viewing them as invitations. Create rituals that honor these moments, perhaps keeping a journal by your bedside for insights that emerge, or developing a simple meditation practice for the quiet hours. As you align more closely with your natural rhythms, you may find that your entire relationship with consciousness begins to shift. The arbitrary boundaries between sleeping and waking start to dissolve, replaced by a more fluid understanding of awareness itself. You begin to experience what Thoth knew, that consciousness is not an on-off switch but a spectrum of states, each offering its own gifts and revelations. The next time you wake at 3 a.m., try this. Instead of checking the time or calculating lost sleep, simply breathe deeply and ask yourself what gift this moment might be offering. You might be surprised by what emerges when you stop fighting and start listening. Now that we've journeyed through millennia of wisdom, from Thoth's ancient teachings to modern neuroscience revelations, it's time to weave everything together into something you can actually use. Because understanding why you wake up at 3 a.m. is only half the equation. The real transformation happens when you learn to work with these sacred moments instead of fighting them. Let's be honest about what we've discovered. When Thoth spoke of the hour of divine receptivity, he wasn't describing some mystical concept beyond human reach. He was identifying a biological and spiritual reality that modern science has now confirmed. Your brain operates differently during the pre-dawn hours. Your default mode network, that constant chatter of daily concerns, naturally quiets down. Your pineal gland reaches peak melatonin production, creating the perfect neurochemical environment for expanded awareness. Meanwhile, the electromagnetic field of Earth itself shifts into its most stable configuration. This convergence isn't coincidence, it's design. And when you wake spontaneously at 3 a.m. feeling alert and peaceful, not anxious or restless, your consciousness is responding to an invitation that's been extended to humans for thousands of years. But here's where most people go wrong. They treat these awakenings like problems to solve rather than opportunities to embrace. They immediately start worrying about tomorrow's energy levels or try forcing themselves back to sleep. This completely misses the point and wastes the gift they've been given. The first step in your awakening protocol is learning to distinguish between different types of 3 a.m. consciousness. When you wake feeling agitated, with your mind racing through tomorrow's problems or replaying yesterday's mistakes, that's usually your nervous system processing stress. These awakenings call for gentle self-care, perhaps some deep breathing, progressive muscle relaxation, or journaling to clear mental clutter before returning to sleep. But when you wake feeling calm, alert, and somehow expectant, as if something important is about to happen, that's an entirely different phenomenon. Your consciousness has shifted into what the ancients called the listening state. This is when the awakening protocol becomes essential. Start by creating what I call your sacred threshold, a specific physical space that signals to your unconscious mind that this time is set apart. This doesn't require elaborate rituals or expensive equipment. A simple chair positioned away from your bed, perhaps near a window where you can see the sky. Keep a journal and pen nearby, along with a small glass of water. The key is consistency. Using the same space each time trains your deeper mind to recognize and honor these moments. When you feel that peaceful 3 a.m. awakening, resist the urge to check your phone or turn on bright lights. Instead, move quietly to your sacred threshold. Sit comfortably and begin what Thoth called the practice of receptive stillness. This isn't meditation in the traditional sense of focusing on breath or mantras. Instead, you're cultivating a state of open awareness, like a satellite dish turning toward the cosmos. Place your hands gently on your thighs, close your eyes softly, and simply listen, not just with your ears, but with your entire being. Notice the quality of silence around you. Pay attention to any images, words, or insights that arise without forcing or analyzing them. This is the state where creative breakthroughs occur, where solutions to persistent problems suddenly become clear, where you might receive what feels like guidance from a source beyond your ordinary thinking mind. Keep your journal within arm's reach because the insights received during these sessions often fade quickly once you return to normal waking consciousness. But here's crucial guidance. Don't write frantically or try to capture every fleeting thought. Instead, wait for ideas that feel substantial, meaningful, or surprisingly clear. These are the gems worth preserving. After 20 to 40 minutes in this receptive state, you'll usually feel a natural shift, either toward sleepiness or toward full wakefulness. Trust these signals. If sleep calls, return to bed with gratitude for whatever you received. If you feel energized, consider this an invitation for creative work. Some of history's greatest innovations and artistic creations emerged from these pre-dawn sessions. Now, let's address the practical concerns that stop many people from honoring these natural rhythms. Yes, you need to function during conventional daytime hours, but working with 3 a.m. awakenings doesn't require abandoning your responsibilities. It requires intelligent adaptation. First, Understand that sleep isn't just about total hours, but about sleep quality and timing. A 20-minute power nap between 1 and 3 p.m. can restore more energy than an extra hour of nighttime sleep. This isn't New Age wishful thinking. It's supported by extensive research on circadian rhythms and sleep architecture. Second, optimize your nutrition and hydration for this alternative rhythm. Avoid heavy meals within 3 hours of bedtime, but keep light, easily digestible snacks available for post-awakening sessions. Herbal teas like chamomile or passion flower can support the transition back to sleep, while a small amount of raw honey provides gentle glucose to fuel nighttime brain activity. Third, communicate with family members or partners about your practice. Explain that these aren't insomnia episodes, but intentional, spiritual, and creative sessions. Most people become supportive once they understand you're not suffering but exploring expanded states of consciousness. The challenge lies in discernment, learning to distinguish between genuine insights and ego-driven fantasies. Real wisdom received during these sessions typically has certain characteristics. It feels simultaneously surprising and obvious. It addresses real situations in your life with practical relevance, and it often comes with a sense of peace or resolution rather than excitement or grandiosity. Be particularly cautious of insights that feed your ego, promise easy solutions to complex problems, or encourage you to make dramatic life changes without careful consideration. The authentic voice of expanded consciousness tends toward humility, practicality, and integration rather than revolution or superiority. If you don't naturally wake at 3 a.m., don't force it. Some people access similar states through early morning, meditation just before sunrise, through lucid dreaming practices, or through what's called threshold consciousness, that drowsy state between sleeping and waking. The specific timing matters less than your willingness to honor expanded states of awareness whenever they naturally occur. Consider joining online communities of people exploring similar practices, but maintain healthy boundaries about sharing your most sacred experiences. Some insights are meant for personal integration rather than public discussion. Trust your intuition about what to share and what to keep private. The broader vision here extends beyond individual practice. As more people reclaim these natural rhythms of consciousness, we contribute to what researchers call collective coherence, a phenomenon where individual awareness practices create measurable effects in the larger field of human consciousness. Your 3 a.m. sessions aren't just personal development, they're participation in humanity's evolving capacity for wisdom and creativity. This ancient knowledge, meeting modern understanding, represents something profound, the possibility of living in harmony with both our spiritual nature and our practical responsibilities. When you stop fighting your natural rhythms and start working with them, you discover that consciousness itself becomes your teacher, your creative partner, and your guide toward a more authentic way of being. As we conclude this exploration of ancient wisdom meeting modern understanding, remember that your spontaneous awakenings at 3 a.m. aren't disruptions. They're invitations to connect with the deepest wisdom available to human consciousness. If this video resonated with you, let us know by commenting, "I understood it."